She said it calmly, almost coldly, like she was talking about rescheduling a meeting, not ending a relationship. I just need some time to figure myself out. No contact during this period, okay? Her voice was steady, even each word clean and deliberate. To clean. I searched her face for something, hesitation, guilt, a flicker of uncertainty, but there was nothing. Just distant eyes reflecting the dim cafe light. Her name was Claire. For 2 years, she had been the quiet constant in my life, the first person I texted every morning, the last voice I heard before sleep. She was the calm in the middle of my chaos. But that night, sitting across from me, talking about time and space, her tone made it clear. Whatever she was looking for, it didn't include me. I didn't ask why. I didn't beg or argue. I just nodded. A simple gesture, but it carried the weight of an ending. When someone says they need time, what they really mean is they want distance. And when they say, "Don't contact me," they're asking you to disappear. "All right," I said. My voice came out empty, flat. She smiled, not sadly, not warmly, just politely. "Thank you for understanding." She placed her hand lightly over mine. It wasn't affection, it was closure disguised as kindness. Then she stood up, put on her coat, and walked out. The door closed softly, but the sound echoed in my head like the final breath of something that used to be alive. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights still on, but the room felt hollow. My phone lay on the table, screen black, reflecting a face I barely recognized, expressionless, drained. I scrolled to her name in my contacts, stopped, then set the phone down. She said no contact. I obeyed. No texts, no calls, no checking her profile, nothing. I told myself this was a test, not hers, mine. I wanted to see how long I could last in silence. I turned the pain into a plan, the waiting into a strategy, the only thing left that I could control. Day 1. The apartment felt so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. By day 3, I started talking to myself just to fill the silence. By day 7, I convinced myself this was good for us, that everyone needs space sometimes, that she'd come back. I believed it, because belief was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Nights were worse. I left the TV on, but didn't watch it, just needed the noise. I ate without tasting, worked without thinking, lived on autopilot. By the second week, I stopped counting days. Time just passed, meaningless, heavy. I imagined how she might text me one morning, "Hey, I'm okay now," and I'd reply, calm and collected, pretending I was fine too. I built that fantasy so vividly that part of me started to believe it was real. Then, Friday night, everything ended. I was scrolling aimlessly when a notification popped up. Claire Thompson was tagged in a post. It was from her mother. I clicked, expecting something harmless, an old photo, a family update. But it wasn't. The post was barely an hour old. Claire stood on a beach, sunlight in her hair, smiling. Beside her was a man, tall, relaxed, their hands intertwined effortlessly, like they'd been that way for a while. The caption read, "So happy to see my daughter smiling again. She deserves this happiness." I stared at the screen. No blinking, no words, no emotion, just cold. The kind of cold that slows your heartbeat. I read the line again and again, hoping the meaning would change. It didn't. It only became clearer. I set the phone down. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the fridge. Everything looked the same as 2 weeks ago. Her mug still on the counter, her coat still hanging on the chair, her scent faint on the pillow. Nothing had changed, except she was gone. I sat there for a long time. No anger, no sadness, just the quiet understanding that she didn't need time to find herself. She just needed time to make sure I wouldn't interfere while she started something new, and the part that chilled me most, I wasn't even surprised. I didn't text her. She didn't text me. We just stopped. And somehow that silence, cold and absolute, started to feel familiar. After seeing that beach photo, I didn't get angry. I didn't even feel betrayed. I just understood. There had been something in her tone that night, something rehearsed, like she had already said those words in her head 100 times before finally saying them out loud. I threw myself into work, not because I cared, but because I needed something to drown out the noise inside my head. Mornings blurred into one another. Black coffee, the soft hum of my computer, the same tasks repeated again and again. No music, no background chatter, just me and the sound of the keyboard tapping against the quiet dot at night. I walked the same route every evening, past the bakery, through the park, back home again. Same path, same timing, same rhythm. There was something comforting about that repetition. It gave me the illusion of control. Sometimes I'd still check her profile, not to see what she was doing, just to remind myself she still existed. But I stopped eventually, because every time I saw her name, my pulse reacted like it hadn't learned yet that she was gone. I laughed at myself for that. It's strange how someone can vanish from your life so easily, yet still live rent-free in your mind, like they never left. One night, I ran into one of her friends at a 7-Eleven near my apartment. She froze for a second, holding a drink, and asked softly, "Hey, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I said, without even thinking. She hesitated. "Claire's traveling right now. With him, her mum's there too. They all seem really happy." I didn't flinch. No emotion, no reaction. Just a calm, automatic reply. Good for her. Then I walked home. The sound of my shoes against the pavement felt louder than usual. Sharp, clean, final. Every step felt like I was walking away from something that had already died. I was just now burying it properly. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the lights in the apartment building across the street turn off one by one. I thought about what she'd said. I need time to find myself. Maybe she really had. She just didn't need to find me anymore. I started writing things down, not diary entries, just fragments of thought. Silence doesn't kill you. It just teaches you how to live with emptiness. People don't leave because they stop loving you. They leave because they found someone who makes them feel more alive. When someone disappears, all that remains is the space they once filled. I didn't write to forget. I wrote to understand. And in that process of untangling thoughts from emotions, something changed in me. I stopped wanting closure. I stopped wanting revenge. I just wanted quiet, complete, disciplined, quiet, because people like Claire, they can handle confrontation, guilt, even anger, but silence. Silence forces them to sit with the echo of their own actions. So I deleted her number, erased the photos, wiped the messages, not to erase her, but to seal the memory in its proper place, inside. Out of sight, unspoken. At first, silence felt like a wound. But over time, It hardened, became a kind of armor, cold, steady, peaceful. And that's when I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't the person hoping for a text or a second chance. I had become the observer, detached, analytical, watching the version of myself that used to hurt, and strangely enough, I was okay with that. About 3 weeks later, I got the first message, not from her, but from a mutual friend. "Hey, how are you? Claire's been mentioning you a lot lately." I stared at the text for a few seconds, then set my phone down. No reply, no reaction. Why would she bring me up now? To check if I was still hurting. To see if she still had an effect on me. By then, I'd grown used to the quiet. Strange, really, the thing that once suffocated me had become the one place I felt safe. A few days later, I noticed her name pop up in the viewed by list on an old story I'd accidentally made visible again. No likes, no comment. Just viewed. I smiled, not out of happiness, but out of recognition. Because that's how it works. Once the person who left feels sure you're no longer a threat, curiosity creeps back in. Then one Friday night, she texted, "I saw you're still working at the same company." That was it. Short, polite, emotionless. I read it, then locked my screen. An hour later, another one came. "Are you doing okay?" I stared at it a little longer this time. Not because I felt anything, but because I understood exactly what she was doing. People like her don't reach out because they miss you, they reach out because they can't stand being forgotten. I didn't reply. And when there was no response, she started posting again, photos that felt too intentional to be casual. The coffee shop we used to go to, the same park bench, a caption with the lyrics from a song we once listened to together. Calculated nostalgia. I looked, expressionless, then turned my phone off. This time, silence wasn't my reaction, it was my choice. A few days later, I got a message from her mother. "Hi dear, haven't seen you in a while. Claire said you two are just taking a short break, right?" I stared at that text, and a slow, quiet smile crossed my face. She was rewriting the story already, carefully, safely, so that if anyone asked, she could still say, "It's just temporary." She wanted to preserve her image. I understood. But what she didn't understand was that I wasn't part of her narrative anymore. I didn't reply to her mum or to Claire. Instead, I added one more line to my notebook. When someone starts fearing your silence, it means they've lost control. That night, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker below, and realized something. She never really understood me. I wasn't silent out of anger. I was silent because I had finally learned that I didn't owe her a reaction. A week later, another message arrived. "Can we talk? I just want to explain." I looked at it for a while, pretending to think, but I wasn't thinking. I was savoring it, the quiet moment when the person who once broke you now struggles for your attention. Then I locked my phone, set it down, and went back to what I was doing. Not out of cruelty, but because the story was already over, she just hadn't realized it yet. Silence was no longer emptiness. It was a statement, cold, measured, absolute. 3 days after her last message, she called. No text first, no warning, just a direct call. I stared at her name flashing on my screen. For familiar letters that once made my heart race now felt foreign. I let it ring until it stopped. 1 minute, 2, then silence. 3 minutes later, a message came through. "Can you please answer? I just want to talk. I didn't open it, didn't read it, didn't reply. The next day, she posted a photo, her and that same guy at the beach again, this time with the caption, "Healing takes time." Short, deliberate, and obviously aimed at me. I laughed, not out of bitterness, but because it was so predictable. No comments, no likes, no reaction. I just scrolled past like it was another meaningless ad, and that apparently drove her crazy. That night, another message came in. "I know you saw my post. Don't you have anything to say?" I read it, then locked my phone. 10 minutes later, "You've really changed. You're cold, like a stranger." And then, "I'm sorry if I ever hurt you." For the first time, I actually smiled, not because I forgave her, but because I realized something. I had taken back the control I once lost. Silence wasn't just a reaction anymore. It was power. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need anger. All I had to do was stay silent, and the truth would reveal itself on its own. 2 days later, another cryptic post appeared. "Some people are silent because they don't care. Others are silent because the pain is too much." It gathered sympathy, comments, people telling her to stay strong. I read through them and thought, she's still the same, still crafting the story so she looks like the one who got hurt the most. But this time, I wasn't part of that story anymore. That night, while the city slipped into quiet, I poured myself a glass of whiskey and watched the streetlights reflect off the wooden table. I thought about how she used to control my emotions with her words, her timing, her little silences. Now there was nothing left to control. She used to be the center of my emotional universe. Now she was a case study, a perfect example of what happens when people lose their grip once you stop feeding their need for attention. A week later, she called again. This time, I answered. "I just want to talk." Her voice was small, trembling. "Can we meet? Just to clear the air." I paused for a moment. "No need," I said calmly. "I understand everything now." "What do you mean?" she asked quickly, her voice cracking. "That you didn't leave because you needed time. You left because you needed a safe space to start over without me watching." Silence. I could hear her breathing, shallow, uneven. I added, softly, "And I respect that. It's just that I'm not standing where I used to be anymore." I hung up. No anger, no pain, no satisfaction, just a strange calm, like closing a chapter in the only way it was ever meant to end, without words, without regret. That night, I wrote one last line in my notebook. "Silence is the language of those who no longer need to win." Then I shut the notebook, finished my whiskey, and stared out the window, watching the city lights blur in the distance, realizing that, finally, I was free from her. A week passed since that last call. No messages, no posts, no sign of her. But I knew silence, for her, never meant closure. It was just a setup for another return, and I was right. On Saturday morning, I got an email. Not a text, not a call, an email, nearly 2 pages long. The subject line read, "I just want to be understood." I opened it and read carefully. She wrote that she had been trying to heal, that she was learning to love herself, that things weren't what I thought they were. The words were soft, but strategic. It was still her, the same woman who knew how to twist guilt into empathy. Even when she was the one who walked away, she reminisced about our mornings, coffee together, quiet evenings, watching movies on the couch. She said, "I don't know why everything changed so fast." I read every line, then replied with just 2 sentences. Things didn't change fast. They simply revealed what they truly were. "I wish you peace." I sent it. Didn't wait for a reply. 2 days later, a mutual friend sent me a screenshot from her Instagram. She'd reposted an old picture of us with the caption, "Some memories never fade." And below that, "I just wish communication wasn't so hard for some people." I stared at the photo, her smile. Once something I thought was real, now looked like a performance. A perfectly timed expression designed to convince people she was the victim, not the cause. I didn't feel angry or sad, just clear. Some people use emotions as tools, and they stop only when no one reacts anymore. One evening, I met up with an old friend, Mark, a coworker who'd seen me at my lowest. He asked, "You good now?" I shrugged. "Yeah, not because it stopped hurting, but because I stopped pretending." Mark nodded slowly. "You know, not everyone can walk away from someone they're addicted to hurting for." I smiled faintly. Maybe because, at some point, I realized I didn't need to win or lose anymore. I just needed peace. That night, I drove home through empty streets. The yellow glow of the streetlights shimmered on the wet pavement. The memories felt distant, dissolving like smoke. I no longer saw her as a loss, just a lesson. Something I didn't need to erase, but no longer had to hold on to. I turned on the radio. A woman's voice filled the car. Sometimes, silence doesn't mean it's over. It's just how the heart learns to survive. I smiled. Maybe that was the truest thing I'd heard in months. When I pulled into my driveway, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes didn't look tired anymore, just calm, quiet, free. I realized then I didn't need closure. Silence was closure. And sometimes saying nothing is the clearest answer there is. 3 weeks later, just when I had almost forgotten the sound of her voice, a message appeared. "I'm near your neighborhood. If you're not busy, can we meet and talk?" I stared at the screen, silent for a few seconds. Everything inside me was calm, but somewhere deep down, there was a small flicker, not from love, but from memory, a faint flash of what once was. I didn't respond right away. I set my phone aside, brewed a cup of coffee, and opened the window. The smell of rain mixed with coffee filled the room, wrapping it in a strange, peaceful stillness. I sat down and reopened an old note I'd written to myself. "Silence is the language of those who no longer need to win." I read it again and again before replying with a single line. "I think we've already said everything." She replied a few minutes later, "You really don't want to hear what I have to say? Just one last time." I didn't answer. And when the screen went dark, I realized I no longer needed to hear her explanations. That night, she showed up at my door. I stood inside, watching her through the curtain. She wore a grey coat, her hair a little messy, her face pale and tired. She stood still for a few seconds, then knocked. 3 short, steady knocks. I didn't open. She knocked again and said softly, "I know you're in there. I just want to say a few things." I stayed silent. She waited for a while, maybe 5 minutes, then turned and slowly walked down the steps. When her footsteps faded, I finally opened the door just a crack. Outside, the drizzle hadn't stopped. The light from the street lamp reflected in a puddle where she'd been standing. If it had been a few months ago, I would have opened that door. I would have let her in. I would have listened, hoped, and let myself break all over again. But now, the only thing I wanted to protect was the quiet. The next day, she sent a long message saying she'd broken up with the other guy, that she realized who really mattered. I read half of it and stopped, not out of anger, but because I knew what she was saying no longer had anything to do with me, a person who only recognizes your worth once they've lost you, never truly saw you in the first place. I deleted the message, turned on some music. Soft notes filled the empty space in the room. No more buzzing phone, no more notifications, no more ghosts from the past. I sat down, took a sip of my still warm coffee, and looked out the window. Morning light was slowly spilling into every corner of the house, and I understood peace doesn't come from someone else's forgiveness. It comes when you no longer feel the need to prove anything at all.